Many years ago, there were people living freely in the vast lands of North America, living in harmony with nature. These people were known as Native Americans and consisted of hundreds of tribes, each with their own unique culture, language, and way of life. They lived by hunting, gathering, and farming, and showed great respect for the sacredness of their land and the balance of nature. Their way of life was based on using what nature had to offer, without overdoing it and in a way that would benefit future generations. However, one day, white strangers came from across the seas in large sailboats and knocked on the doors of this peaceful world. These people were settlers from Europe and wanted to build a new life in the vast lands where the Native Americans lived. The first encounters seemed friendly. The Native Americans welcomed the new arrivals with hospitality, giving them the information they needed to survive. They taught them which plants to eat, which animals to hunt, and how to cultivate. Although the settlers seemed to be very grateful for this help, their real intentions were very different. Over time, the settlers wanted more land. The Indians did not want to give up the sacred lands, where the spirits of their ancestors lived, to the outsiders. However, when the settlers started to come with weapons and soldiers, the situation changed. At first, the Indians tried to negotiate to maintain peace. However, the settlers gained the upper hand with the weapons and technologies they brought from Europe and squeezed the Indians into smaller and smaller areas. In the following years, this situation led to major conflicts. The Indians resisted to protect their lands and lives. However, their numbers were few and their weapons were inadequate. With the advancement of the white man, the settlers began to demand more and more land. The forests that the Indians considered sacred were cut down, rivers were poisoned, and mountains were hollowed out for mines. The tribes were driven to less productive and more remote areas because of the lands taken from them. These exiles went down in history as the Trail of Tears, because this road was a death journey where thousands of innocent people struggled to survive in hunger, cold, disease, and pain. Many Indians lost their lives on the Trail of Tears. The elderly, children, and the weak could not bear this brutal journey. The Trail of Tears was not only an exile, it was also a symbol of the process, of the destruction of the honor, culture, and independence of the Indians. In this process, many tribes lost their existence, and their history was erased. With these brutal practices, the settlers aimed to break the resistance of the Indians and completely seize their lands. The Indians lost not only their lands, but also their way of life and culture. Gold mines, railroads, and farms were now established on the lands they considered sacred. While the settlers built their own world by ignoring the Indians became increasingly isolated and poor. The tribes were divided. Some continued to resist, but most were forced to submit to the power of the white man. Over time, the American government developed policies to keep the Indians under control and assimilate their culture. Indian children were separated from their culture and families and forcibly sent to boarding schools. In these schools, children were raised in accordance with the culture and language of the white man, while they were forbidden from speaking their own language. The aim was to make the Indians forget their identity and past. This meant the theft of not only the land, but also the identity of a people. However, despite all these difficulties, the spirit of the Indians did not completely disappear. Many tribes struggled to maintain their culture and traditions.